everyone, welcome back. In this video we are looking at the Week 7 NFL Draftkings and Fanduel final look for Sunday. We have an extra game on Draftkings for Sunday. Well, both slates have both sites have the Sunday night game, which was flexed, the Cardinals-Seahawks game. The Draftkings also added the Las Vegas game, so have an extra game over there. But nonetheless, it's looking like a fun Week 7, so let's get started. As always, you guys can hit the like button down below. I really appreciate that. You can subscribe if you haven't already. Follow on Twitter. You can check out Thrive Fantasy. Some info is here if you wanted to get some deposit match for when you sign up. And let's get started. So this week, quarterbacks. There are about like 6 that look appealing to me. At the top, there's 2 that obviously look really good, and the best game one of the best games to stack up this week, which is the Sunday night game between the Seahawks and the Cardinals. You have Kyler Murray standing in at the same tremendous price tag that he's been for a large part of the season. He was in that Tuesday video that I made, and nothing has happened this week or over the next couple days, which has got me off of him. I still think he is one of the best options this week at quarterback. I always like to get my quarterbacks, at least when I can, guys that have rushing ability, guys that give you added ceiling, added floor. So in a similar range, like definitely would play Kyler Murray. You know, if you wanted to go all the way up to Russell Wilson, there's nothing really stopping you. There's plenty of value on the slate we'll get to. And I don't think Wilson will be that popular, so that's the reason why you would play Wilson over Murray. But Murray gives you a little bit more upside with his legs. Aaron Rodgers just to bounce back as a team. Now, they are dealing with some injuries. We could see that. We could see Aaron Jones is questionable. If he misses, then the slate opens up even more. So that will be something to pay attention to. If Aaron Jones misses, then Jamal Williams will become get a huge boost and become one of the best plays of the slate. So keep an eye on that. But right now, Rodgers looks like a really good stack with Devontae Adams. They have the highest total right now at the only team above 30. You have a couple teams at high 20s, but the Packers right now, against this Houston team, they should put up points, and Rodgers at 7K looks really strong. You know, you can also stack it up run it back with the Houston side in that game. Deshaun Watson has looked really good the last couple weeks. He's starting to get some production from Brandon Cooks. He continues to have a strong connection with Will Fuller. He is only 6,800 on DraftKings. He looks strong. Even on FanDuel, he's playable at 8K. So those are the top 4 quarterbacks for me, and then if you needed some value plays, there are couple of guys below 6,500 like Justin Herbert against Jacksonville, who has done nothing but impress. Chargers have 28 implied points right now. He's getting Keenan Allen back, who missed most of the game last week after catching that touchdown pass. But really good matchup against the Jacksonville secondary. They haven't been able to stop anybody this year. And then Drew Brees at only 6,100. Just the fact that he's Drew Brees, the Saints have the 4th or 5th highest total on the slate. He's missing some of his weapons still, but him and Kamara look like a fine, viable option or a viable 1-2 stack. You could even stack him with Traquan Smith, who's really cheap. I'd get a cheap stack. But I don't think I need to go that cheap at quarterback. But if I did, I would look at Drew Brees. And the one quarterback that I like is 5,500 Joe Burrow for guys below 6K. Just against Cleveland, I think you can pair him with A.J. Green if you wanted to, or Giovanni Bernard, and get a couple of really cheap players in a stack. That we know the Browns have given up huge amount of points this year. Burrow has looked really good so far. A little bit less than the last couple weeks, throwing some picks, but it's a great matchup this week. He had faced some tough defenses, has Burrow, but he gets a great matchup against this Cleveland defense, which has been susceptible against the pass. So each of the quarterbacks that I'm looking at really love Kyler Murray, Rodgers, and Watson. Moving on to running backs this week, Kamara is the guy you want to pencil in. He is the first guy you should probably have in your cash lineup. No Michael Thomas this week. No Emmanuel Sanders, who's out for COVID-19 reasons. Might have got tested positive, did he? But Kamara is just going to benefit so much. He's going to be the go-to guy for every single play that he's out there. We know Sean Payne likes to get creative. He likes to have plays where he takes out Kamara, puts in Taysom Hill to run on 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 3, and that did nothing but backfire last time they played. So hopefully he kind of smartens up and uses Kamara a little bit more in those short yardage situations, because he can easily get that 1 to 3 yards. He is the top play. You want to play him on both sides. Aaron Jones have that asterisk next to his name because he is questionable. Now, if he happens to miss, then you plug in Jamal Williams in his place, who's super cheap. That will leave you with like plenty to spend up at receiver if you go with the cheap Jamal Williams if he's in and starts. If Jones is out, and you go with Giovanni Bernard, who's only 4,500 against Cleveland, then you pay up at receiver, pay up at tight end, pay up at defense, pay up at quarterback, and you have a very similar lineup to a lot of people, but that is probably the way to go in cash. This week is looking a little bit chalky right now, so seems like a good week for tournaments. Kareem Hunt looks strong against Cincinnati. They've been getting blasted on the ground, so I think that Kareem Hunt at below 7K, right around 7K on Fanduel, he looks pretty strong. Chris Carson at only 6,400 on DraftKings. They like to throw the ball a lot more, the Seahawks have this year, which is surprising considering the last couple years, but he's still getting the carries. He still catches passes out of the backfield. Gives you that dual ability and upside, so I think he looks strong against the Cardinals. That game should be an absolute shootout. It's going to be a fun Sunday night game. McKinnon, I'm not that interested in him, but just had to put him in there as a mid-range guy just because they are missing, like almost all the running backs right now. Jeff Wilson Jr. is questionable. If he happens to miss, then McKinnon should get like 80-90% of the workload. So that's the reason to have him in there. They're missing Tevin Coleman is out for a while, and then Raheem Mostert is out with an ankle sprain. Kenyon Drake, just as potential game stack, he should be in there if you wanted to do a game stack on DraftKings. He's only $4,800. He's still getting around 15 to 20 plus touches a game as a lead back, and that offense is going to be nice, especially if Hopkins happens to miss. He'll get a little bit more involved, maybe get a couple more carries, maybe they get a couple passes out of the backfield, but he looks strong. He also looks like a pretty viable and low-owned pivot away from Giovanni Bernard at only $300 more, so that's a reason to like Drake. And then last but not least, it's Giovanni Bernard, who's 4,500 on DraftKings, 48 on FanDuel against his Cleveland defense. Now, Cleveland is decent against the rush, but the reason you play Bernard is because he can catch passes. He's going to be out on the field. Joe Mixon was almost a 3-down back. I mean, kind of a 2-down back, and then Bernard gets 3 downs work. Bernard should get like 60+% of the carry, 60 to 70+% of the work. Maybe they put in the backup guy for him, but he should be getting about 15 carries and potentially 5 to 8 targets this week against the Cleveland team that has been giving up some points this year. So those are the running backs at least I'm looking at this week. Kamara and Bernard are my favorites, and then I will really consider Jones if he happens to play. If not, plug in Jamal Williams and go cheap at running back with Kamara, and then kind of do like a 3-man stack at running back that way. But yeah, that's it for running backs. Let's go over to wide receivers. So plenty of good wide receiver options this week. You have a lot of guys at the top that look great. You have a lot of guys down below that look great. So let's get started with at the top at Davante Adams. Just looks really good this week. No wide receiver is especially with Hopkins questionable. Adams looks great at below $8,000. He is almost 9K on FanDuel. That looks a little bit expensive, but I think he still looks strong either way, especially if Jones misses. If Tanyan misses, then Aaron Rodgers has not that many other options. He's going to rely on Davante Adams. It's a tremendous matchup against Houston. They've given up a lot of points, huge big plays. So last week at Tennessee, even in some rain, both teams put up 30+. Should be a shootout this week between that game. And then the other game that looks super appealing is Seahawks-Cardinals. You have DK Metcalf, who has been averaging about 100 yards per game this year, averaging almost 20 fantasy points. He looks tremendous against Arizona. He might be matched up in a tough one-on-one matchup, but nobody can cover him one-on-one, so I'm not worried about that at all. His $7,200 price tag looks great. His $7,300 price tag on FanDuel looks tremendous. Like the fact that he's $1,600 cheaper than Davante Adams doesn't make that much sense because he has just been as good as Adams. I mean, Adams gets more targets, but he's also missed some time. So, based on the course of the season, like Metcalf has probably deserved almost an $8,000 price tag. Julio's $8,600 on FanDuel. It looks a little bit expensive there, but $71 on DraftKings looks fine. So I think you can probably consider Julio. It's another good matchup with them. The Falcons put up points. I'm not too worried about this Detroit defense. They have been pretty bad this year. No Slay anymore. He's on the Eagles now, so I think that you could play Julio Jones. Stephon Diggs looks fine this week. He's probably not going to get that much ownership, which is why I have him on here. He is good price tag on both sides. Bills are going to put up some points this week against the Jets. The only concern you have is if it's a blowout, but they're going to be missing John Brown again this week. Well, he returned last week, didn't do anything, but John Brown is out this week, so Diggs will get even more attention from Josh Allen. He has had some big games this year. We had like a 16 target game. He's had a couple of big games catching long passes. So I feel good about Diggs at 7K, especially if he's not going to get that much ownership. Then you can look at Kenny Golladay if you wanted to run it back, if you wanted to get some Atlanta guys in there. He is 6,700 last week. The Lions kind of got all their points mainly by the ground. They had 2 touchdowns from Swift. Peterson ran in a touchdown. Hopefully this week it's more of the air game. If you play Kenny Golladay, he had only 4 catches over 100 yards though, but you're looking for him to get into the end zone this week, and he's a good price tag on DraftKings. But I think I might go with like Keenan Allen. I like him a bit more. At only 6,200 against Jacksonville. He's returning. Like I mentioned, he missed a lot of the game last week, but it looks fine this week. Really good price tag if you wanted to just play him by himself. He looks strong. Not that many guys in the slot get as many targets as Keenan Allen does. Absolutely, Justin Herbert absolutely loves throwing him the ball, and the matchup is tremendous. Chris Kirk looks really good this week, especially if Hopkins is limited or happens to miss. He will be like the top guy in that offense from a receiving standpoint. He looks really good this week, 4,900 in that game against Seattle, which Seattle has been really bad defensively, especially against wide receivers. Right now they're giving up the most fantasy points to wide receivers this year, so really like Chris Kirk, potentially have another big game. And some more cheap guys are Jarvis Landry, 46 and 55, a little bit less interested now that we have, Traquan Smith down there at 4K, but he's still on the list. AJ Green is still on the list at 4,300. He kind of got going last week. He's facing a Cleveland Browns team who also gets pounded by receivers, giving up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. Hopefully he gets on the same page with Burrow once again this week. I don't want him to get outscored by Higgins and kind of get outplayed by Higgins and Boyd for the entire season. So I think he'll step up. I think that last week was kind of an indicative or an indictment of that going forward. And then Traquan Smith, that's only $4,000. Now, he is probably going to be a really strong play this week. Probably one of my favorite cheap receivers. If not, no, definitely my favorite cheap receiver at 4K. You can play him and Kamara together in the same lineup. That looks fine to me. You're talking about no Sanders. You're talking about no Michael Thomas again. So who does Drew Brees throw the ball to? It's going to be Traquan Smith at only 4K and 53 on FanDuel. Think he looks like a really good play, especially with how many targets that Drew Brees did throw the ball to Emmanuel Sanders last week. He got 14 or 16 targets. So a lot of that's going to go to Traquan Smith, who didn't have that big of a game since early on this year, but he's going to be out on the field the entire game, and he's going to get some looks. So really do like Traquan Smith. Moving on to tight end, with all the cheap value that we have with Giovanni Bernard, with Traquan Smith, feel like it's going to be a week to pay up a bit at tight end. So if that happens, give me Travis Kelce. No Sammy Watkins again this week, so going to continue to be not that Sammy Watkins was taking stuff away from Kelce, but more of a concentrated offense for KC. They have so many guys that always make plays, that can make plays, but take one of those guys out. Some of the other guys get a little bit more, they look a little bit better. So Kelce has 63 on DraftKings, 79 on FanDuel, looks strong. Kittle looks good. Definitely like Kelce a little bit more just because they have a higher total by a lot. Then you could go with some other guys. If you don't have the cap to pay up a tight end for those 2 studs, you can go with Hockenson against Atlanta. Hunter Henry looks strong. Him and Keenan Allen have looked really good, and Mike Williams last week looked amazing. But Hunter Henry looks strong against Jacksonville. Jared Cook, another Saint player that Drew Brees is not going to have that many options. He's going to look at Cook. He's going to look at Traquan Smith. And then Darren Fells with Akins looking like he's not going to play again. 4,100, he looks to like a really strong value tight end just because Watson likes to give him the ball and like to look his way in red zone. So, especially with how much Green Bay happens to struggle with tight ends a little bit, I think he looks strong. And then finally, defenses, like the Bills defense, obviously, if you wanted to pay up. I mean, last week, the Dolphins defense isn't even that good, and they happened to shut out the Jets. So, a talented Bills defense, although they haven't had that much to show for based on their DraftKings points this year, but they have a lot of talent on the defensive end. They look amazing against the Jets if you can pay up for them. If not, you could look at the Chiefs against Denver. You could look at the Bucks against the Raiders. That's only on DraftKings because FanDuel doesn't have that game. Look at the Chargers as a mid-range defense against Jacksonville. And then finally, the Redskins against Dallas. They're only 2,500. Dallas looked awful against the Cardinals last game. Maybe Dalton looks a little bit better, but I'm not that impressed with what I saw. Zeke continues to fumble the ball, so you got a lot of opportunities for the Redskins defense to potentially get some takeaways with interceptions from Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton also took some horrible sacks, so maybe they can get some pressure on the quarterback. Maybe they can get a couple fumbles. 2,500 for them. I definitely don't think the Dallas offense is going to be putting up a lot of points like they did with Prescott. So that is it for me. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed. I feel like kind of covered everything that I'm looking at for this slate. Thank you for watching, and best of luck this week.